Hey, what's going on? So I'm going to give a very brief overview and oversimplification of some training principles that I think you'll find useful. So some of the biggest mistakes I see folks make when they're in the gym is they do way too much and they go way too hard too frequently. And then you could argue on the other side of that is folks who, only show up once a week and, don't do enough. But the problem with going so hard in the paint all the time is you're not allowing your body adequate time to recover, which will ultimately affect progress. In addition to making you more susceptible to burnout, overuse issues, injury, overtraining syndrome, etc., etc. So I love what Dan John says, where he says, little and often over the long haul. That's the focus, is the dosing needs to be appropriate. So you can show up on a frequent basis, just don't do a ton. That'll be fine. But if you're showing up effectively overdosing the exercise dose, then you're going to be wrecked. You're not going to feel well. You're probably not going to sleep well, and then that leads to a host of other problems. But what I tell the folks I work with is, here's one example of some of a method that I use with my guys. And a lot of this comes down to populations that I work with, like police, fire, tactical. Their schedules are hectic, stress levels are high, and they don't have the luxury of having a predictable schedule day in and day out, of having there's just a bunch of problems we're trying to get addressed first. But as much as I would love to have everybody follow a specific type of periodization, it's more, what tool am I going to use? Like, what periodization model am I going to use for the individual based on their life circumstances? So one model that I follow that seems to make a lot of sense to the population I just mentioned is conjugate format. And it's not, I'm for sure, and I know there's folks who will go out there and poke holes in it and, just pay attention to the negative and the problems and all this stuff. But I'm more interested in the positive aspects, like what's it do right. And it also allows for, when you're working with folks, you need to play to their personality as well, because that's very important. Like, what's going to make sense while getting results. So this allows for just enough, creating some boundaries, so to speak, where we stay within these boundaries, but allow for a little bit of creativity. So here's how I set it up, is tell my guys like 3 or 4 days per week. So if we look at just the basic model of, okay, what is force? Force equals mass times acceleration. So then all we're really doing is we're just manipulating the variables that affect the force equation. Okay? So the way I break it up is I ask my guys, like, if they're going 3 days a week, we'll probably go, full body lifts 3 days a week. If we're going 4 days, we might kind of split it up into like an upper lower format. But what I look at is I just ask them, like, do you want to go fast or do you want to go heavy today? Which one are you more in the mood for? And we can only do these once per week. So if they're more in the mood to lift heavy, cool, we're going to play to that. If they're more in the mood to go fast, cool, we're going to back off the weight and play more of the acceleration component. And then after either one of those days, whether it's a mass day or a speed or an acceleration focused day, then we're going to do some rep effort work. So I'll explain this in just a second, but and that's it. So kind of each day has its theme. So if it's a mass day, we'll work up to a heavy top set, do a couple back off sets, and that's not the same as maxing out. It's just working up to a top set. And usually I put time constraints on that because populations I work with tend to be very competitive, and I don't want them to spend all day in the gym trying to break records and potentially injuring themselves because they're chasing weight. I'm more interested in the technique and the grind that they're going to go through on a very heavy lift, but not necessarily a max out. So anyway, after they get through that, if it's like a heavier, higher mass day, then we'll just ask the question, okay, well, what are the movements that are going to support or enhance the primary lift? So let's say, for example, a deadlift. Well, the two that I look at would be hamstrings and any kind of back movement you want. So that's where, like, hey, let's get some vertical pulling, some horizontal pulling in, mix and match, understand the different ways we want to attack these muscle groups, and go at it. And then more on the acceleration day, it's going to be a bit lighter on the front end. Again, there's going to be time constraints, and certain percentages we'll assign, and then some lighter, more volume involved in that session, but some lighter supplementary or support work. So the three types of efforts we look at would be the following. So we're going to have ME, where that'll be max effort, and then from there we will have SE, which is sub-max effort, and I'll put a slash there, and I'll also put dynamic effort. So just kind of depending on the day and who I'm working with, I'll just so there's some consistent nomenclature there. But anyway, so we have ME and then SE, and then the final piece will be RE, which is rep effort. And one that I used to play with a little bit that I kind of gotten away from, but it was working really well, would be an RE plus, and that would be a rep effort plus, where we would take something to absolute failure. I don't do that very often. That's used incredibly sparingly, but that would always be in a spot where the risk reward is in our favor. It would be very, very difficult to get injured using those very specific types of RE plus. But anyway, that's kind of the split in what I use. And then and I'll just go over that briefly with guys. I'll go a bit more in depth than I'm going here, but just touch on that. Hey, here's our parameters. Here's how many days we're going to train, and the rep effort or the sub-max effort or the ME. Like, what are we going to do? And then how do we know how much is too much? So here's what I'll suggest, and these are guidelines that I think are a good idea to pay attention to. So for the max effort and the back off sets, I will refer them to Prilepin's chart. And again, if you start going down these rabbit holes of human performance, you'll see very quickly that you have a lot of really smart people on both sides that will argue great points and poke holes in things and say, well, you should never do this, never do this. Yeah, that's cool, but what I'm interested in is just having some guidelines for folks. So Prilepin's chart has, folks have criticized it in the past and things like that, and that's fine. But what I go over is, like, here's some rough guidelines to get started. But I also let my guys know, like, hey, these numbers are not perfect. This was taken in the USSR when, athletes had every single aspect of their lives controlled. And you can toss out the PED discussion or whatever. That's fine. But what I add in there is just for context. Every aspect of their life was controlled, in addition to PED usage, and we should probably take about, 10 to 15% off of the numbers that we're using as a reference for Prilepin's chart. So that way it'll kind of give our guys some guidance over, hey, if we're gonna do, some max effort work, here's some good guidelines. If we're gonna do a few back offsets, here's some good guidelines. So again, that stuff is not written in stone forever and always, but all we're looking for here is just to get some basic outlines and guidelines and parameters for folks to work off of. So, final point is, okay, I got my gym rats, my guys who love to train, and I tell them, hey, I actually need you to do less. Come in the gym less so you can recover more and grow more. And there's always the guys who are like taking a step back and they're like, what the hell? Like, if I want to make more progress, I need to be in here more often. It's true up to a point. But we also have to allow appropriate time for the body as a whole and all the other systems within the body to recover. They all recover at different rates, depending on what we're doing and depending on the demands. So what I will tell guys is, we only got 3, maybe 4 exercises that we can use in a session that will drive our decision making a lot more and allow us to say, okay, these exercises that we're choosing, we have to have a really good reason why we're using them, and we're going to put in really, really good effort because we know it's only one of 3 or one of 4 exercises that we've chosen for this training session. So anyway, outside of that, what we'll get into is, well, what do I do the other days of the week? Well, the other days of the week, we're going to go with, some LISS, low intensity steady state, where we're going to get in some just general heart health benefits that we want to make sure to address. But we also do that because we want to make sure that that's going to facilitate some recovery for our guys too. So we'll do some LISS work, and I'll give them parameters on just general conditioning, which is more like zone 3-4 stuff, and then some very specific guidelines on zone 5, because again, like these populations left to their own devices, they will smash themselves with zone 5 on a regular basis. So then the rest of the time, if they're not doing either one of those things, then they can get back in the gym and even do a recovery session that is focused on, hey, if you want to bro it up and do bis, tris, calves, abs, cool, do that as a little circuit for 20-30 minutes and you'll get a good pump, and that'll help a little bit with recovery because it's gonna be hard to go too hard, too heavy with that, although I'm sure somebody along the way has. But anyway, those would be the major things I would look at. And then with other recovery modalities, when we're looking at sauna, swim, hot tub, cold plunge, whatever, that's fine. That's all well and good. They're all good tools. You just need to understand what happens when you use those tools. What are the implications, both good and bad, when you use those tools? So anyway, I said brief, and here I am 14 minutes later, but that is a very quick oversimplification of one way you can go about your training. And there are certainly more details that I did not get into, but just want to kind of give you some parameters here and some guidance of, what should a session look like? What should a training week look like? How's that training week affect my my training month, my year? And if you're not thinking like that, then you need to dive in a little bit more and look at that from a 30,000 foot view to help you with your health and performance goals. Because if you're not tracking things, if you're just going in and guessing, you are doing yourself a tremendous disservice. So anyway, if you have any questions, comment, shoot me a message. You can always email me, travis@dhpcoaching.net, and we can dive into whatever your specific questions are. Have a good night.